Hey there, sexy sausage. In the last couple of weeks, I've grown a bit tired of this whole framework war, to be honest. Of the next people arguing, and then the Svelte people arguing about their own stuff. And I thought to myself, ooh, do I really want to get into it and make content about this and hear people arguing? Uh, and I thought, why not just focus on just JavaScript for a wee bit? Because at the end of the day, all of these frameworks, there's no magic behind it. It's all written in JavaScript with some compiling magic going on there. So I thought we'll cover the keyword this, apply, call, and bind, because they're really important topics. And if we get a good understanding with it in this episode, we might build a little like jQuery clone. That's just gonna be a super simple example, not too crazy, but hope you'll understand it. All right. Also, drop a like, support this channel, subscribe, it goes a long way, and check out any of my courses at developbyed.com. Okay, so let's get started with the keyword this. So it can be a bit difficult to explain, but this is essentially a reference to an object. So by default, in like a global execution context, so if I just wrote this anywhere in my JavaScript file, it's gonna mean either two things, depending on which environment you're working in. So if you're working in the browser, this keyword is gonna refer to the window object. And if I open this up, and I'll show you here, it's just a silly little website. You're gonna see the window object. And this window object holds all of the fun APIs that you know and love in JavaScript, like crypto if you want to generate a random ID, or you have set interval, clear timeout, right? I said both of those wrong. Clear interval and clear timeout. And then the inner width, all right, you know the jazz. Now, if you're working with Node, then it's gonna refer to a global object. But that's it. Now, what we also learned is that functions have their own execution context, right? So if I make a function called get user detail or something like that, right? I can have a variable here like age, and that's 25, right? So we learned that if we create a function, it also creates its own execution context, and the variables here are scoped to this function specifically. So there's no way for me to do something like that. That's gonna error out, right? If this age would have been in the global execution context up here, then it's accessible to anything outside and inside a function. So that would work there, and this would also work there. So if I do a get user detail, and that, and then if we have a look here and do an inspect, we're gonna see 25, 25, all right? But what you have to keep in mind is if we console log this in like a top level function, it's still gonna refer to the window object, all right? So if I do console log, sorry, not console log, get user detail, and hit save, you're gonna see that we still have the window, all right? But what it's recommended to do is to add this use strict. And as you can see, if I add the use strict, it's gonna stop you from doing silly bugger mistakes, and you're gonna get undefined. Because when we're talking about the keyword this, we rarely wanna talk about the window object. If we do need the window object, we just type it out, right? We'd say window. So the keyword this is not really meant to be used in that way, right? Where we're just referencing to the window object. So I always recommend enabling strict mode when you're working with this keyword, just to stop you from doing these silly mistakes. All right, so we know that. Now, let's throw in another example. So in what context can the keyword this change? Well, if we have an object, so let's say we have a user object, and here we'll have an age, for example, property of 25. We have a name of developed by Ed, but here we might have a function like get details. And I'll set that over to a function here like that. And here I'm just going to do a console log and do backticks and say my name is this dot name, and oops, give me the backticks, and my age is this dot age. All right, so when we say user dot get details here and have a look, as you can see, this keyword now references the user. And the easiest way to know what this keyword represents when you are calling it on the method here, when you have a method on an object, is to see where you're invoking the function here, so get details, right? And look to the left side of it. So if it's a method on the user, then this keyword is going to mean user. All right, so it's user.name. So user.name. It's going to give me develop by add. Now, don't make this common error where you say const user detail and assign that to user.getDetails. All right, we're just passing reference to it. But when we're invoking the function, you are going to see that we get undefined. All right, so look where we're invoking the function. Take a look at your left. What do you have? Do you have any user? No. Then this keyword is not going to be associated with it anymore. But what if I want to make this a bit more flexible? Because right now, yeah, this works on the user here. But what if I have two users? You know, I don't want to add a method to all of them that pretty much has the same functionality. So what would we do in that case? Well, we'd probably split it outside and have it up here. So we could say we can say function get details, or we could just call this get user details to be a bit more clear. So we can set that equal to a function here, like that, and I'll just copy this, right? So again, in this context, this keyword is going to reference to the global object window. So what we'll do is we'll remove this from here like that and hit save. All right. So now they are completely separate. How can we combine them together? Because again, I can go here and I might just say user, or I can just call this Edwin, right? And then I might have another user here called Charlie, right? And this might have a different age, have a different name. All right, and you might actually have maybe about me or something. I like turtles. All right, and then here you might have another about me, or like a about me description. There we go. I like to play with the computers. There we go, hit save. All right, so we have two objects. So this is a bit more nice because we'd have to add these basically on both, right? Because we want to do the same thing, which is inefficient because we're allocating memory to both of these functions. What we can do is use one of the three methods called call, bind, and apply. So what is bind, first of all? Bind basically lets us get the function, so in this case, get user details. And if I add bind, I'm basically binding the object that I want it to be referenced to. So if I say I want this to bind to Edwin, then this keyword is going to reference to the Edwin object. All right, so this one here. So if I hit save, and if we look in the browser, let's have a look and do a refresh. As you can see, nothing's going to happen. So if I invoke the function down here, you're going to see it still says undefined and yeah, undefined again. So why is this happening? Remember, if you use bind, it creates a new instance of a function associating it with the object. So we need to save this. So I can call it something like Edwin's detail. So this is again a function, right? So rather than doing get user details, we do Edwin detail and then invoke it like that. So now if we have a look at that. My name is developed by Ed and my age is 25. All right. But there might be cases where you don't want to create an instance of a new function and you just want to invoke it directly without taking up any memory space. So that's where you can use call. Again, with call, we don't need to assign it to a new variable, all right? So that function is not going to be stored anywhere. What we can do is just get user details, call, and call it with this object in mind. So if we have a look, as you can see now, it invokes directly without creating a reference. And then we can do the same with Charlie as well. So if I do Charlie here, and there you go. Oh, and if you want to pass down additional arguments, you can also do that here. So if I want to pass in some kind of date like 94, I can pass down maybe a hobby that I have. So maybe games. I have no idea. Then we can pass it in here, date, and then you'd have interests or something, right? So you could add that here as well. So comma, I'll just add a date like that, just so you can see. There we go. And if we go back here and do a refresh, as you can see, we have 94. All right. And there is another one called apply besides call. And the only difference with that is that these additional parameters are passed down as an array like that. All right. But everything else should still work the same. Now, if we're working with classes, it's pretty much the same as working with a constructor on a function. So I can, if I do like a class of country like that, or a class of user, we can do a constructor here and pass in maybe a name and an age. All right. And then here we can call the keyword this dot name and set it equal to the parameter that gets passed down. And then we can call this dot age and set that equal to the age as well, like that. And again, we can have maybe a describe method down here where we can just console log and say this dot name is now a user on this website and his age is, and then we can do this dot age. All right. And hit save. Perfect. So now if I make a new user here, so I'll say user equals new user, specifically with the new keyword here. That's very, very important because the new keyword is going to instantiate a new object for us. And when the new keywords gets used, the this keyword is going to reference to the new instantiated object that we're making down here. So here I can pass in the two parameters that I'm looking for. So I can say developed by Ed, and I can pass in an age like 25. And then if I call user.describe, we are going to get the same kind of response. All right. Now be careful when you're working with arrow functions because the arrow functions do not have their own this binding. All right. Let me show you an example. So we're gonna go back to the user here. We're gonna give it a name of developed by Ed. And I'll have two methods here. So we have a regular function that you normally make like this with the function keyword, right? And then here you'd say console log this dot name. All right, so you know that works. You know that the this here is gonna reference to the user object. However, if I do an arrow function, which you make by doing the parameters and then the little equals and arrow, and here if you say console log this dot name, you are gonna find out very, very soon that if we say user dot regular function and user dot arrow function, you're gonna see that the second one we are not gonna get. So be careful with this. When you use arrow functions, it's always gonna reference the next level up of the execution. So when is this useful? Well, there is another case where we might have the this keyword. So take this title, for example, here we have a H1. So now check this out. If I go and add a title.add event listener, and let's just add a click here. And I'm gonna run a normal function. So if you run a normal function, then the keyword this is always gonna reference to the current target. So the current target in this case is gonna be the title, right? So you might want this, you might not want this. You might want to just have an arrow function here, and then we're back to referencing the window object. Okay, now that we have a bit of an understanding of all of these terms, let's see if we can put together a small little library that's gonna animate any element that we want, kind of jQuery style, whether to remove all these paragraphs, fade them in, fade them out. Yeah, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna create a variable first. And I'm gonna call this like a $sign. The name that you pick here really depends. You're gonna see a lot of people do like underscores because you don't want to interfere with any of the other APIs that are on the window object. So that's why you might see $ or underscore something here happening. And we'll just call this $ and set that equal to a function. And basically what we want to do is kind of make like a jQuery selector where you can go like that, and I want to select the p tags, and then let's say I want to be able to like chain together different commands like add a class of fade, or maybe fade out like that, and I can pass in a time. So we're gonna be creating something similar to this. So what do we need? Well, we made a variable called $, and we have a function here. So we're gonna need a selector in this function. So I'll just pass in selector like that. And what can our selector be? Well, it can be either one element or it can be multiple different elements, right? What if this p tag here, we have multiple of them, right? And I want to animate all of them out. So what I can do is create an elements variable here, and I'll just say document.querySelector all. And rather than passing in the selector like that, though we could probably do that in this case, what we can do is just add a call on it. And I'm passing in the document and the selector here. So what I'm saying basically is always reference the document object. And this is the selector that I'm passing it down to. So in this case, the paragraph. All right, cool. Now what we'll do is create our actual library functionality. That's misspelled for sure. So what we'll do is call it, library. And here, the first thing we're gonna pass it in is the actual elements that we're gonna animate. And the second parameter can be all of our different methods. So we can maybe do an add class that's gonna take in a class name. And here what I wanna do is call this.elements.forEach. Again, if we have a look here, the this keyword references the actual library object. So I'm calling basically library.elements, and for each element that we have, what I want to do is say element.class list.add, and we'll add the class name that the user wanted to add. And that's it. That's literally a simple line of code. But we need one more thing here. So after we do this, we might actually need to expand this. So let's go back here. Let's just do it like this, element, and I'll explain why. There we go. We're gonna open this up like that and say element.classList.add class name. And at the end here, what I want to do is return the library like that. Now, why are we returning the library? Returning the library is going to be able to give us the ability to chain together all of these different methods, essentially. So I can add the add class here, but then I can still add the dot fade out or any other class that I want to keep going and going. So now what I can do, if I want to go down here, I can maybe add a fade out. So let's create that as well. Fade out. This is going to take a duration in. And again, it's going to be this.elements for each element. We are going to run a function here. And what I'm going to do is get the current opacity of this. So I'm going to assume it's 1. Then it's probably not a good idea actually to assume it's 1, but we'll just go with this. We'll do decrement. Probably the best way would be to kind of go out and see what the current opacity of is and then decrement from there. But we'll keep it simple for now. Decrement. I'll take the 1 and divide it by duration divided by, let's say, 10. Cool. And then here we'll do a fade, and I'm just going to set an interval like that. And this is going to take 10. And basically what I want to do is do the current opacity and just like decrement it. So I'm going to say minus equals to decrement. But what I also want to do to make it a bit more fun is when it goes to opacity 0, I want to remove it would display none. So what we can do is element style the opacity is equal to the current opacity right now. Perfect. So after this, again, what we'll do here at the end is go, let's see, 1 down, 2 down, right here, and say return library as well. And that should kind of be it. As you can see, nothing's actually erroring out here anymore. So let's try it on maybe this H1. So we can go down here and say $. And then, as you can see, we can put in a selector. Of course, again, if you want to make this really nice, you'd add all the TypeScript support and everything to it. But let's try it. We'll grab the title, and then on the title, we can do maybe a fade out and pass it in 1000. So let's have a look. Ooh, looks like we are getting an error. So let's see what's up with that. Oh, my apologies. I did forget one thing here. We're never clearing that interval. So let's say if current opacity is smaller or equal than 0, then what we want to do is just get rid of this interval and pass it down that fade. And then element style display, we'll set it to none. We totally forgot to add this functionality because here we're just fading it out. But when we reach 0, we want to get rid of the interval and also add 0 to that, or display none. But there's still one thing I forgot, is you're gonna get this error here right now saying cannot read property of undefined. So what we have to do is on this library object at the end, also return library like that. Cool. So now let's see if we do a $, and then we can pass in a selector. So we can say .title, and then look at that. We can pass in @class or fade out, or we can get the elements, but we're not gonna do that. So let's say @class and fade. Let's just say fade. So let's see if that works. We'll select the element and look at that. It has a fade. Awesome. So we can add classes if we want, and we can also actually add a fade out to it, like a second, and boom. And look at that. Once it reaches 0, it also adds the display none to it, which is really cool. Will this work on multiple elements? So let's give that a shot. P tag, save. And boom, look at that. Display none, everything works really fine. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this little episode here. Hope you learned something new. I am more than happy to keep up the series because, yeah, it's honestly more fun to kind of see the inner workings of JavaScript, and also I really want to get more into TypeScript and teaching that on the channel. So let me know if you want to see more of this stuff. I'm happy and excited to make it. And until next time, I wish you a great day and get out of here.